I'm pretty sure we all know that if you're a Russian citizen who lives in Russia and also decides to criticize its government and its
special military operation in Ukraine,
you might be in a lot of trouble. In 2022, Russia passed a new law about discrediting the military of the Russian Federation, which made it so that challenging Russia's narrative about the war in Ukraine and criticizing the Russian army, or even possibly just saying the word war, could give you a prison sentence from 5 to 15 years. Now you guys might be thinking, the easy way to avoid this is just leaving Russia.
Не, в натуре классно, но... Заебись. Чётко.
Well, what if I told you that even outside of Russia, criticizing the Russian government can still be very dangerous for Russian citizens? What's up guys, it is your boy Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about the dangers of criticizing Russia outside of Russia, with a real-world example that recently happened in Canada, where a Russian woman who criticized the war in Ukraine was refused her Canadian citizenship because, according to the laws of Russia, she's a wanted felon. Let's see what it's all about.
It gives me such great pleasure to announce you are officially a Canadian citizen.
For most new Canadians, a citizenship ceremony is a big deal. But for Maria Kartasheva, this is an even bigger deal.
Yes guys, spoiler alert, this story had a good ending. However, not all of them do.
Maria moved to Ottawa from Russia about 4 years ago. She's also no fan of the Putin regime and has protested at the Russian embassy in Ottawa against the invasion of Ukraine. In March 2022, she blogged about the Around the same time, she and her husband Dmitry started their application to become full citizens.
By the way guys, I cut out a certain part from this video because the host describes the events that transpired in Bucha. And guys, I will specifically use the language such as the events that transpired because
I prefer really not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble. And I don't want to be in big trouble.
Yeah guys, what else can I say? I'm not really looking forward to getting a criminal sentence in Russia, so this is how it goes. Just know that Maria was facing prison time in Russia specifically for posting about this thing.
Maria didn't realize it, but she was under investigation in Russia for what she blogged. Last spring, she was arrested in absentia in Moscow under a law passed shortly after the invasion in Ukraine, banning spreading what the Kremlin calls false information about the Russian army.
So yes, exactly the law that I talked about. This is currently the #1 law Russia uses to essentially crush dissent and any uncomfortable conversations about what is going on.
When she learned of her arrest, she thought she better tell the immigration department. See, there's a section of the immigration rules that if you're dealing with a foreign criminal charge, you could be denied citizenship if there's a similar law in Canada. We'll come back to that in a second.
So yes, first of all, I just realized this might be ridiculous to Western viewers, but yes, she was sentenced in absentia without even being present at the trial, without even having a chance to defend herself or anything, because this is just one of those crimes in Russia that you can defend yourself against. You know, Russia has like a 99% conviction rate anyway, so like, at this point, Russia can make anybody a felon without that person even being present.
Maria thought everything was sorted when she was invited to her citizenship ceremony a few days later. She shows up, she mentions the criminal charges, and they won't let her take part in the ceremony while her husband swore his oath.
I had to sit there listening this judge saying how all of those people deserved to get this Canadian citizenship, which means I didn't deserve it. It was very upsetting.
This is just sad to watch. Just sad. Sad fucking times we live in.
She'd passed the test, she'd gone through the process, but she hadn't quite crossed the finish line. So Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada said they were looking at whether the allegations against Maria would be a crime in Canada too. Meanwhile, Maria was convicted in absentia and sentenced to 8 years in a Russian prison.
Yes guys, once again, 8 years for one little post. Most free country in the world with no cancel culture, by the way, and stuff.
7 months later, Maria gets this letter, citing the law she broke in Russia. Remember the one about spreading misinformation about the Russian army?
I certainly do.
Based on the information currently available to me, it appears that you may be subject to prohibitions under the Citizenship Act.
I felt betrayed because I was hoping that I am safe here in Canada.
So obviously this is something that not only Canada has, a lot of countries have this, where your background is checked essentially if you have any felonies, if you have any convictions. More often than not, at least before 2022, Russia would usually try to extradite and, you know, get certain felons back to Russia from other countries for committing like actual crimes. So imagine somebody like robbed a store or killed somebody and moved to another country. If that person killed somebody in Russia, it totally makes sense for that law to be applicable here as well. And obviously there's a huge chance that the person would be deported or whatever. now Russia also uses these mechanisms to try to get the traitors of Russia who, you know, are Nazi back to the motherland to send them to prison, essentially. And the thing is, pretty much the majority of countries in the world, including Western countries, still consider what Russia has to say regarding this, even in cases that are clearly politically motivated. And I do really think that this is something that needs to be fixed, perhaps, you know?
The law being used in Maria's case has been widely criticized as a way to just clamp down on opposition politicians and regular people. That's when Maxim Katz got involved. He's a Russian opposition politician who also has been convicted of the same crime. That's why he's living in Israel. He's also a YouTuber with an excellent studio setup.
Yes, Maxim Katz is a pretty famous Russian opposition personality, a YouTuber, and he lives in Israel, which I would say probably might be the only country in the world that actually would not extradite a Russian citizen to Russia for political reasons, because Israel just doesn't extradite anybody who's a citizen of Israel. So that's great for anybody who's a double citizen of Israel and Russia who's also anti-Putin and lives in Israel, but it's also kind of a double-edged sword because actually a lot of Russian corrupt politicians over the years have escaped justice over their corruption by fleeing to Israel. And actually the reason why I care about this is because there was this guy called Mikhail Yurevich, who was a mayor of Chelyabinsk, my hometown in Russia, and also the governor of the Chelyabinsk Oblast for quite some time. And he was corrupt as shit, he was embezzling the funds of the Chelyabinsk Oblast, you know, classic stuff for a member of United Russia. But basically after he already stopped being the governor of Chelyabinsk Oblast, he actually got a criminal charge on him in Russia for corruption. And it just so happened that Yurevich was actually in Israel right when this investigation started, and also he was saying he's in Israel just for some health reasons and that he's actually gonna go back to Russia, which he never did. What he did is that he ended up, I assume, getting Israeli citizenship and then just moving to London, and he lives in the UK now, probably living in a mansion off the money he stole from the people of my region. Which is, by the way, fucking awesome. I really love how corrupt politicians and oligarchs of Russia, who are criminals, get to live a happy, nice life in London, while people who are criticizing the Russian government are facing persecution in the West as well. It's fucking awesome. I really, really like it, guys. Keep it up. Keep it up.
That's when I got involved. I reached out to IRCC and got a very bureaucratic and processy answer. So I sent them another question, asking them to address how the Russian law has been widely criticized as anti-democratic. And they said, basically, they still have to review the file. I also asked the Russian embassy for comment and got no response.
God, I fucking hate bureaucracy. It's just... these systems most of the time have zero regard for human life and like actual humans.
So we went ahead with the story, and it quickly gets picked up on social media and by other media outlets, even outside of Canada.
So yeah, we're here in a kind of a situation where essentially she would probably still be in the same situation if the story wasn't picked up by media and didn't get huge. So if you ever end up in a situation like this, you gotta talk about it and give it as much publicity as possible, or otherwise, the system is probably not gonna make a decision in your favor. And the thing is, it's kind of like this everywhere. For example, myself, right, when I was in the process for applying for my European visa, one of the things that you need when you apply for any residence visa usually is to show your certificate of non-conviction. From the country where you're from, obviously. And obviously, guys, once again, when you were Russian, you know, it's a little bit different. So essentially every single Russian that is currently trying to move to the West, or any other country, I guess, these people basically just have to shut up or censor themselves, so that they essentially don't become a felon and they actually can move wherever they're trying to go to. So this creates an amazing paradox, doesn't it? Where a Russian, you know, if they're being silenced, if they're not talking about what's going on, if they're not criticizing the government, they're like a Z-org that is complicit, that is allowing the Russian government to do all of this. But also, if you're a Russian citizen who is outside of Russia even, who's trying to apply for a European visa and move to Europe to actually be physically in a place where you have more of a security to, you know, say these things, well, if you say something against the Russian government and the Russian government notices that and gives you a little nice Christmas present by sentencing you to 8 years in prison in Russia, oh, well, you're a convicted felon then. I guess we don't want you in our country because you're like, you know, a criminal who does criminal stuff and is a bad guy overall and kind of sucks. So yeah, I mean, I do find this little paradox very, very interesting.
Her neighbors leave her messages of support, and among those offering help was foreign security expert Wesley Ward.
And the notion that we would take seriously in Canada and try and find a Canadian equivalent to this Russian law that's designed to stamp out dissent is, to me, mind-boggling.
Then,
hey, tell that to JJ McCullough. Bill C-13 or whatever it is. Canada has no free speech, guys. This isn't even a jab at JJ McCullough, I like him. It's just that a lot of people on the internet like to say that Canada is not a free country and Russia is actually more of a free country.
5 days later, Maria gets a message.
I got invited to the citizenship ceremony and I was like, that's not real. Like, that's gotta be some kind of scam.
The minister, out of the blue, posts on social media, quote, Canada's citizenship eligibility rules are designed to catch criminals, not to suppress or punish legitimate political dissent. Ms. Kartasheva will not face deportation and has been invited to become a Canadian citizen.
So yeah, I guess we can all be happy in the end at least, because for Maria, this story turned out to be a happy ending. The media talks about it and the government of Canada actually had a decent response to all of it and gave her her citizenship, so this is great and we need more of this. We definitely need more of this, and this is kind of why I wanted to show you this in the first place, but this is where I give you, the sad side of the story. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen like this. But I'm not gonna lie, the West currently, meaning liberal democracies like Canada or America or countries of the European Union, they definitely are the safest place for a Russian citizen to be criticized in Russia. However, most Russians don't even get to be in the West, Because moving there and getting a visa is very difficult and very expensive and just not a plausible option for a lot of people. And as a result of this, a lot of Russians who have left in the past 2 years, a lot of them first of all went to the post-Soviet countries, and actually Armenia and Georgia currently have been proven to be the safest regarding this. However, other certain post-Soviet countries, for example Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, they are more friendly with Russia in a sense, and they have a sort of a closer collaboration and cooperation or whatever. And throughout the last 2 years, there's been multiple cases of anti-war activists from Russia who actually got prison sentences for this exact same crime. Several of them have been actually deported from these countries to Russia and are currently in jail. And the same thing actually happens in a lot of other countries of the world that essentially have sort of neutral relations with Russia. For example, a lot of countries of Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, there is a risk of possibly being deported if you're a Russian who's guilty of this thought crime. For example, here's a story of a Russian immigrant, Sergei Kuropov, who lived in Vietnam for 9 years, and essentially he also criticized the war in Ukraine on his social media, ended up getting a felony in Russia, and Vietnam was actually about to extradite him to Russia. Because a lot of these countries that have a neutral relationship with Russia, when they receive a request from Russia to deport people, they essentially think that Russia must be doing it in good faith. So Sergei here was in actual danger of being deported and actually ended up reaching out to the Refugee Committee of the United Nations, ended up getting the status of a refugee and actually managed to get political asylum in Canada where he currently lives. So once again, shout outs to Canada. But once again, this is one of those stories where the person was basically this close to ending up in prison. And it's just kind of scary. Because for me as a Russian citizen, I honestly have to even think about my travel destinations. And I actually have to think whether, a certain foreign country will actually be safe for me to be in. You guys might think it's all fun and games and it's all, jolly when you're a Russian who left Russia and you can basically say anything. Well, that is not the case, because once again, the Big Brother is always watching, and the Big Brother has very long hands that can grab you from across the globe and essentially end your life. So, realistically, I don't even see any solution to this. I understand that a lot of the requests coming from Russia regarding fugitives can still be legit when we talk about actual felons. So I guess not taking any requests from Russia would also be not the best decision, but also treating anybody who's a criminal in Russia for essentially their criticism of the government also as a criminal in the country where they currently live, that is pretty fucked up. And I just hope that we get less stories like of those people who got deported to Russia, and we get more stories like Maria here, who actually managed to, break out of the chains of having a Russian passport and having to watch every word you say. So yes, essentially every single Russian that is currently even outside of Russia is facing a moral decision whether to criticize the governments or not, because in a way, you're not just putting yourself in danger if you possibly want to go back to Russia. You are actually putting yourself in danger in many parts of the world, and this is not a thought that a lot of people want to live with. And I guess we can say that Russia is pretty successful in actually managing to suppress the free speech of people even outside of Russia, because who the fuck wants to ruin their life and become a felon who's not gonna be allowed to get a visa or a citizenship anywhere when you can just not say anything and keep living your life and actually manage to exist like as a normal free human being in the free world? And honestly guys, I kinda cannot even blame the people who choose to not speak up, because this entire thing is fucking ridiculous. But I guess it is what it is, and realistically I don't see any way of, improving the situation or fixing this somehow, so I guess every single Russian that, dares to speak out and actually make their voice heard today, they have to consider these things, and they have to kind of always watch their back in a sense, which is not a fun way to live your life, necessarily. I guess that's just the way it is. So yeah guys, I guess that's gonna be pretty much it for today's video. Hopefully I gave you a little bit more of a context what it's like to be a Russian citizen even outside of Russia today in regards to, you know, how much and what you can say. And yeah, if you guys did enjoy today's video, then please make sure to slap the like on it. Subscribe if you're new, and also, I don't know, spread this video around. This is an important message and everything. I want this video to be heard. And yeah, once again guys, if you do want to support me additionally, that is financially, then you can go over to the link down in the description and become a YouTube member. It's basically like YouTube's own version of Patreon. It's like a monthly donation. It's the best way to support me. Or if you want to do a one-time donation, you can use super thanks underneath this video. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.